5 of these oral history interviews. Today is February 9th, 2024, and it's 10 a.m. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Rory, and I'm going to ask you to share your age, occupation, how you identify, and your birth year.
Sure. My name is Rory Fukuda. I'm 66, retired. I was a designer draftsman for a public utilities company for about 33 years. And so I've been retired now for about 10 years now. I retired early. And born and raised in San Jose. I was born and raised and grew up in a small neighborhood in San Jose called Rosemary Gardens. It's actually about a mile or two north of Japantown, near First Street and Gish. I don't know if you guys know where that is. Near First and 101 out there. I now live south San Jose, a little bit further, but yeah, so we're pretty much retired now. Anything else? I don't, did I miss anything? No. Okay.
Diego.
Okay, yeah. So, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your family background.
Sure. Like I said, I was born and raised in San Jose. My mom still lives in the house that I was born and raised in with my brother. And it was a small little neighborhood. So I was born 1957. So most of my memories is during the 60s, going to elementary school then. And back then, San Jose was mostly farms. And there was a downtown area, but it was really small. And there were a few shops downtown, few stores. But pretty much in my area, where we grew up, yeah, it was pretty tiny. Yeah. Most of my family lives here in San Jose, aunts, uncles, grandparents. So we had the usual family gatherings on the holidays and things like that. But yeah, pretty much that's it as far as family goes. Mm-hmm.
Christine.
I was just wondering if you could tell me like more about what it was like growing up during like the time and place of your childhood.
Sure. In the 60s, pretty much, like I said, most of it was farming community. And where my neighborhood was a little bit north of Japantown, kind of north San Jose. But beyond that, I don't know if you guys know where the Matrix casinos are down in San Jose. It's kind of 101 and First Street out there. But north and beyond that was just farmlands. So I remember from my school, if you looked out the window, all you saw was fields and orchards. And that's pretty much the area. We were on the outskirts of town, so to speak. And the way the neighborhoods were set up is around Japantown, there were like 4 or 5 elementary schools. And each elementary school served a specific small little neighborhood group around that area. In my area, there was so-called Backrod Elementary. And that served a community and housing area of about, I don't know, 800 to 1,000 homes. And that was pretty much my world growing up in the 60s, was there. And all my friends and all the kids all went to the same school, and we were within bike riding distance of each other. And that was pretty much how it was growing up in the 60s. And then by the time I reached junior high, then what it was all the kids would say, well, what elementary school did you go to? What elementary school did you go to? So we were all known for the different areas of schools that we went to, and we all kind of congregated in junior high. What else? As far as growing up, Pretty much the school was the central location where all the kids would gather. To give you an idea, if like there were 2 or 3 of us were at school and we wanted to start a baseball game, what we would do is send everybody out on bikes and start knocking on doors and saying, hey, go to Harvey's house to see if he wants to come play baseball. Go to Jerry's house and see if he wants to come play. So we would gather kids like that to have a baseball game or a basketball game at school. And so from kindergarten to 6th grade, our world was kind of in that neighborhood pretty much, and nothing much beyond that. I did have, though, my father owned a business in Japantown. He owned a barbershop with my uncle. And so I've got exposure to Japantown through my dad. He was involved with the Buddhist church, so festivals and things like that, he would help out. So I've got exposure to that. So, but pretty much elementary school was pretty much in the neighborhood and didn't venture out too far. Yeah. But
And then, like, did you have a firm community that you felt well connected to? And did you have any like specific places in mind that you felt like a sense of belonging?
from the ages of about from 5 until 12, it was kind of limited as to what I felt belonged to, as far as a community. And again, it was pretty much the school, the neighborhood. There were a lot of kids in this one section of neighborhood, and we all knew each other. So for a kid that age, 12 and under, that was pretty much my community. We'd always be getting together with 3, 4, 5 different guys, girls. We had a creek behind the neighborhood. We'd go there and catch frogs and snakes. Walking home from school, if there were pears growing in the orchard across the street, we'd grab pears and be eating pears on the way home. And that was pretty much it. Just focusing on school and just having fun, really. So there wasn't much sense of community as a whole, other than just being a kid. Yeah, but pretty much within that neighborhood. We never ventured beyond that, very rarely. Yeah.
So was like the kind of neighborhood where you felt that kind of belonging to?
Very much so. Yeah. For me, that was the community. And I think for most of the kids, from what I've talked to, my friends who went to other elementary schools and lived in other neighborhoods, that was kind of their community too. Yeah. And a lot of those communities have disappeared. Neighborhoods, there used to be, like I said, 5 or 6 different elementary schools around Japantown, and each one had their own little neighborhood. Since then, out of the 4 or 5, there are only 2 now that are existing. And so now everybody buses and parents bring their kids to school now by car. Hardly anybody walks to school anymore. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just one question to add to that. Were there any specific places in Japantown that you might say, well, that's still a place that I, have a lot of memories of, or I still, pass by that place, have memories?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, my dad's barbershop is still there. And I think it's turned into it's still a hair salon, believe it or not. And I think it's African-American. They specialize in African-American hair. But there were diners and restaurants that I used to go to when I used to hang out at the barbershop with my father. And those have since changed over and turned into restaurants and are not the same as they used to be when I was a kid. Yeah. There's been a lot of change in Japantown, a lot of turnover.
Do you feel like the turnover was pretty quick between different businesses, or that it took a while for things to sort of new businesses to come in, or has that pace changed over time?
it was slow. Mostly it was the older generation, my grandparents' generation, owning businesses. And then it was just a matter of whether their kids, my parents' generation, would take over the business or not. And in some cases that did not. And so a lot of the restaurants remained empty for quite a while until somebody picked it up and renovated it and brought it back. So, and it was pretty slow, especially during the 70s. Japantown there wasn't a whole lot there. A lot of storefronts, a lot of buildings were empty. So it wasn't as like it used to be in the 50s or early 60s. Yeah.
I'll leave it to Omar to ask number 4.
Can you talk about your teenage years? Did you join a community or a group with similar interests?
Let me see if I remember. Not in my teenage years, no. Pretty much most of my friends that did, they joined they took judo at the church. But not a whole lot of community stuff was going on during that time. I was focused mostly on junior high and then high school. But the only community during high school and junior high that I was a part of was music. Since 3rd grade, I played a musical instrument, and I played all the way through until about the 1st or 2nd year of college. But yeah, not a whole lot of community joining. Yeah, right now, the only communities, back then, the communities were like Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, or if you played sports through different organizations, like the church had its own baseball team and basketball team. There was PAL, Police Athletic League, where they had their different sports going on. But that was pretty much the choices in the 60s and 70s that I had. Yeah.
Then, how did the transition from young adulthood shape your participation in the communities that matter to you? What changed and what stayed the same for you over time?
It's pretty much wasn't until I was like high school senior, right around there, that I started looking at things a little bit differently, more nostalgic. So I'm looking back and seeing the changes in Japantown, seeing the changes in downtown San Jose and all around San Jose, the growing development. This was just before the high-tech boom. And there were already changes. Farmlands were disappearing, and going away and being developed, and neighborhoods were popping up and businesses were popping up. So there was this constant transition happening, and it was happening really quick, especially in the, like I said, mid to late 70s. And it was just before the tech boom. So right then you start feeling, when a lot of change is happening so quickly, you start to feel a little nostalgic. You start looking back on things, you start trying to see if maybe, you hear people talking about preserving this or preserving a festival of that, or a certain art form or building, but it wasn't until I was, unfortunately, a little older, before college, before I started noticing that and caring about it. Yeah.
And Sean's going to ask it.
Yeah. Just a quick note, I come from Huntington Beach, California. And I've seen like the photos of Huntington Beach in the 50s and 60s, where there used to be these towering oil rigs along the beach. From the 90s, when like there wasn't a whole lot of business there, but I saw my community grow, and I kind of felt that sense of nostalgia of like, what it was before all of these businesses came in and changed how Huntington Beach looked. So I get that. I feel that. My question, can you talk about a community you were a part of most recently that you feel a strong sense of belonging to?
Currently, right now, I find a lot of projects in Japantown lately. Now, I used to work for a nonprofit, and I used to build planter boxes and things like that for them, and gates and fences. And then they lost their grant money and stopped doing their thing. But in Japantown, I know a lot of people down there. I walk my dog down there. I'm always talking to the shop owners who are there early in the morning, just opening up. And just by talking to them, I find there's so many things that they're struggling with. You know, it's just part of being self-employed, I would imagine. And so I find myself helping them out in a lot of ways. And in some ways that gives me a sense of, feeling like I'm contributing somehow to Japantown. And I've been doing that now for actually quite a few years. And every now and then I get somebody coming up to me saying, every time I see the gate, every time I see the bench, every time I'm making the mochi or laundry, I think of you because of the things that I've made for them. And I try to make things for them on my projects. I try to make it a little bit more personal for them, and rather than just make a box or make a gate. But just little things here and there that just kind of contributes and helps out both friends and some businesses and acquaintances in downtown.
So has the space changed? And if the space has changed, how has it affected your community?
Well, you're talking about Japantown in general? Yeah. I can't speak for the community, but as far as personally change is good. I mean, it's inevitable. But there's definitely been kind of a revitalization of Japantown in the last 20 years. It's been slow, but it's noticeable. Shops are coming back. A lot of people in their 20s and 30s now are opening businesses in Japantown. You see a lot of small pop-up stores coming up here and there. Where there used to be a cannery on the other side of the railroad tracks, there are now condos and housing. In fact, they just built a 6-story apartment complex very close to what used to be a city corporate yard. And it just used to be they used to just house a bunch of maintenance trucks there. So with the living spaces that are growing in the area, you get a lot of people coming into Japantown. And that kind of pushes the development of new businesses, new restaurants, and so I've noticed that in the last 20 years that Japantown is definitely growing in that regard. So change is good, yeah, in that sense. But there's also an idea of preserving Japantown. Everybody uses words like quaint, charming. People say, this is one of the last few original Japantowns in America. There's only a handful of them left. So there's also that of trying to keep things the same, but also changing.
And then with most recent events, how did you see COVID affect the community? And how did that affect these these generational mom and pop shops that possibly had to close down during that time period?
Japantown was just like every other place in America. Because some of the places were family owned, a lot of the family-owned businesses adapted and coped with COVID. Sure, they had to shut down in quite a lot of places, but in general, they're still in business today. A lot of the business owners who do not live in Japantown but own the buildings that work there, some of those we lost. Yeah, some of those just never came back. But you're noticing now, after what has been about 2 or 3 years after COVID, that you're still seeing shop owners now suddenly renovating their restaurants. There's about 1 or 2 that I still pass by that say they only do takeout and phone orders. So there's no dine-in yet. And you see them renovating the restaurants now. And so that's starting to come back. But like Steve mentioned earlier, the change is definitely slow. Yeah, it's not fast at all. So, but it's happening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
What does it mean to you to belong to a community? And has that definition changed at all over time, in your opinion?
I definitely have a sense that I'm somehow connected to, well, my dad being working in Japantown, me going to church in Japantown. I definitely have some connection there for sure. And I try to maintain that by, like I said, working and helping out projects in Japantown. And it's more nostalgic now than anything. But yeah, it's definitely important. Yeah. And what was your question? What was the second part of the question?
I was
Sorry.
asking like what it means to you to belong to a community and if
Sure.
that's changed like
Okay.
over time.
It definitely has some meaning for me because it's very personal. Has it changed? Not really, no. Even though Japantown has changed, um, everybody else changes with it, and so that's good. I don't know if there's any big. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Christine had a question to add, which is, can we, she wants to know, what do you think is important to preserve in Japantown and why? Like what aspects of it do you feel like are worth really expending energy to preserve?
Mostly it's the history. There's a lot of unknown history in Japantown, a lot of families who were there before the war and who came back. A lot of property owners. There's still a lot of original property owners. Some are involved, some aren't, but just preserving the history of Japantown. Things like the Japanese American Museum, which just recently has they've been there for what, about 20 years now, which in the big scheme of things is recent. They're helping to help preserve the identity of Japantown. And for me, the Japantown is mostly about the business owners, the longtime business owners who've been there, the people that my father were friends with, and then the kids that I grew up with who lived around there. So
if any, how do you account for a changing sense of community? How do you account for the transformation of how we think about community, or how you think about community? What do you think is shaping all this? Or what forces do you feel like are shaping the change?
I don't know what's causing that. I noticed that, a lot of I don't know if you guys hear this very much, but when you start talking to people in Japantown, a lot of times people will say things like, and I hear this a lot, wow, it's really nice to see young people interested in this. It's really nice to see young people doing this. It's really nice to see people of your generation getting involved. Which kind of tells me maybe that my generation kind of dropped the ball on that in regards to keeping the memory, preserving things. So there's this sudden, I've personally noticed this sudden interest in history, preservation, community, where in the 70s and early 80s, there wasn't much of that. Not for me anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. In terms of thinking about generations and their I guess their zeitgeist or the spirit of their time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the 60s and 70s is a time that you might speak to that a little bit. Like, what was the attitude or the spirit of that
Mm-hmm.
earlier late teens and early 20s, like, spirit of that age?
I think a lot of it was more of a San Jose thing. San Jose was expanding. Like I remember when I was in elementary school and we would drive, there would be population signs at the city limits. And I remember seeing the population of San Jose being like 95,000 people, 105,000 people. And throughout the 60s, that's pretty much what it was. And then suddenly in the 70s, you saw 200,000 people, 500,000 people. Pretty soon, by the mid 70s, it was over a million, living in San Jose. And I think the expansion of San Jose, the urban sprawl beyond downtown, the setup of the Valley Fair Mall, Paseo de Certe, all these malls were popping up everywhere. People weren't hanging around in the central downtown area, which included Japantown. So we were like Diego saying, I don't know much about, I haven't noticed Japantown much. And that's kind of because there's so much on the peripheral. There's so much more stimulation and everything outside of that area that until you like stop and say, or think about the history, think about what was going on in Japantown, that you don't really see it, But yeah, the 70s were kind of Japantown wasn't much then. Yeah, there was like maybe one or two restaurants, if that, and one of them was Chinese restaurant, and no shops, no beauty salons, no gas stations. There were two gas stations that were abandoned. Yeah, there was just church, pretty much, and there were like 4 or 5 different churches around in Japantown, actually. Yeah.
You kind of already addressed the question about the neighborhood and your sort of routine, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about specific businesses or places that you go to in Japantown that you feel are really significant in terms of their story, the history.
There's a handful of places in Japantown that have been owned, like even before the war. Families have owned those stores. And then when they came back after camp, they reopened the stores. I guess the stores were, I don't know the history behind what happened during the war, but these have been in the same families for as long as I can remember. Like I said, even before the war. Santo Market on Heading, Kogura Gift Store on 6th and Jackson, NB, we used to call it NB store. It's Nichibei Busan store on Jackson Street between 3rd and 4th. And Roy Station, which has since was a gas station, has since been renovated into a coffee shop. Those four, is it four? Yeah. Oh, and the Manju shop. Those were the only family-run stores that are still in the same families. You know, and those, when you go in, they just, a lot of them, they haven't changed a lot. Yeah. And so those places have meaning. The other places are just memories, pretty much. You know, a lot of the buildings are still the same, but the storefronts are very different. The businesses are very, very different now. But yeah, there's a nostalgia there, because even when I go there, when I'm talking to friends in Japantown, we end up talking about, or remember when Jim used to own the grocery store here, or now it's a nail salon. Remember when so-and-so opened a, you know, a pharmacy here, and now it's a golf shop, you know, things like that. We're always talking like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but there's still a few family-run places in Japantown that if you were to go in, it's, yeah, straight out of the 60s. It really hasn't changed. Yeah.
What kind of conversations did you have during COVID with those business owners, those 5 spots of any, if you did have conversations about the effects of COVID on their business or their, I don't know, how they were doing?
Most of the conversations were just in passing. I would get answers like, yeah, it's really rough. Yeah, we only open 3 or 4 days a week, those kinds of things. But many of the families that I knew just survived. They were able to just change. Like, I think Santo's grocery store ended up not selling groceries, but ended up selling sandwiches and food. In fact, they have a big lunch thing now. And they built an outdoor window, takeout window, and that's where they were serving food during COVID. Roy's Station was still serving coffee during COVID. And they basically created an outdoor takeout window, you know, as well. So a lot of people just adapted. But yeah, I personally don't know how they survived, you know, but they did. Yeah.
And since you do know these folks pretty well, from what I can tell, could you talk a little bit about the particular families and how you related to them? Like, say, the Santo Market folks, like, how did you know them? And did you go to school with some of them, or like, what was the connection?
Yeah, I grew up with them. I grew up with some of them, some of the kids. Yeah. Yeah, like, for instance, Roy's Station. I went to high school actually with the kids, the guys who are now owners of the gas station. They bought the property from the wife's father, Carol. And so now they run the gas station now on their own. And so I'm more closer to them, going to high school with them. The others shops, I was mostly I went to junior high with them, but kind of lost touch with them. Yeah. But
And how, what do you know about the Kogoro family, or the family that runs the Kogoro?
not much. I went to junior high with the daughter, and she still runs the store right now, I think, along with the brothers. But yeah, I guess the only people I am really close with would be Roy's Station, the Rast family. Yeah, they're the ones who run the shop now. Yeah.
And who is the person who runs Kogura, and what do you know about the family?
I think here's Kogura's run by I think it's Jim Kogura, and I went to school with the Debbie Kogura, and they're there, so it's a family run. I lost touch with them a few years ago, so I don't know what's going on with them so far. NB department store is run by the Arlene. Her married name is Tetsuno. That's her father ran the store, and now she's running the store. And I think her last name is Arlene. I think it's Damon, Damon. Mm-hmm.
And you said you did some work for the Manju people that run Manju?
I do. I still do. Manju shop is run by Judy and Tom Kumamaru, Kumama, Kumararu. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I build, well, in passing, while walking by, I would talk to Tom. And he has, for his Manju shop, he has these steam boxes. They're called Seiro boxes, Seiro. And he used to order, and he was talking, and I go, how are things? And he says, oh, fine. But he goes, I need to get some more boxes because the steam boxes are just breaking down. I go, really? Where do you get them? He goes, I order them from Japan. And he goes, and they cost me an arm and a leg. I go, what are they made out of? And he goes, wood. I go, and I have a workshop in my garage. I says, well, I can make those boxes for you. And so that's what I do. Is now, for the last 8 years now, I supply him with all the wood steam boxes that he uses to steam the manju and to make them. In fact, I'm making some right now. Yeah, so he just New Year's Day, he asked me if I could make a few more boxes for him, so I'm making them right now.
So how many projects do you have going right now?
I've got the Manju shop boxes that I'm doing right now, and that's the only one right now. Usually there's always a project coming up.
Right.
Before that, it was not so much tied to the Japantown community, but I made a dollhouse for one of my friend's kids. That was about a 4-month project. New Year's, I did a bobblehead to commemorate the owner of Roy Station. What he does is he comes to work every morning. And I don't know if you've ever been through Japantown early in the morning, but the owner, once he sets up shop, sets up the tables, he then sweeps all of Japantown. He's got a garbage can and a broom, and his name is Frank Rast. And he cleans Japantown every single day. He carries around a can of acetone and everything, and he wipes off all the graffiti from the buildings. He trims the trees every single day. So Frank Rast is married to Carol Muratsune, and the Muratsunes own that 5th and Jackson corner where Roy Station is. And Frank and Carol were high school, and they got married, and they bought the property from Carol's father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think
Sure.
Sean wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
How has the community's resilience been during like economic hardships such as like the 2008 recession, obviously most recently COVID? And I'm curious about this because I just moved here from Louisiana. I lived there for 5 years. And I would arguably say that they're probably one of the most resilient communities within the United States because they always get hit by natural disasters, floods, winds, and the government's very slow to respond at times with aid. So people are really the only things that can come to each other. So how has the community around Japantown and within it survived and, gone through this?
During 2008, I didn't notice anything in Japantown changing a whole lot. If businesses were hit, yeah, I don't recall exactly if any business actually shut down due to that. During COVID too, a lot of places closed because of COVID, but temporarily. But I didn't notice any businesses actually folding up. Some of your other people you interview, like Tommy Korast, might have better insight on how the businesses did during those different crises. Like I said, the only thing I noticed that hit Japantown really hard was just in the 70s, when I think it wasn't so much an economical crisis during the 70s, although there was a recession and a gas shortage. I think it was more of from what I noticed, more of a generational change, a shift. Older generations not being able to carry on with the business, and it was a matter of whether the younger generations picked it up or not, or they had to, or if not, then they had to sell the property, type of thing. Yeah. So as far as 2008 and COVID, from my perspective, it seemed that people were coping and surviving. I think in San Jose, high tech was hit the hardest. There you saw people losing jobs. There you saw buildings emptying out and for lease. But didn't see that much in regards to the private business owners in Japantown. Yeah.
That's good. I feel that way about when I lived in Louisiana too, because you would see these small communities of people, like, the shops that have been there for generations. They open back up to the community. They're there for them. So
Right.
thank you for that.
Exactly.
I appreciate it.
I think the bigger you are, the harder you fall. I think it's kind of thing. Yeah.
I want to ask a question about the future of Japantown, and after that, I want to see if the students have any other follow-up questions. But I'll go ahead and ask this question: is what do you think is the future of Japantown? What do you think it's going to be like in the next, throughout this next decade? You think it's going to change?
I've talked to a few people, and they're saying that, like, there's a sort of a community or business community. Like I told you about the Japantown Business Association that Tomiko's president of, and she might be able to speak about this better. But you have a sense that there's a sense of wanting to grow, not so much outwardly, but grow, community sense wise, but at the same time keeping it the same. There's a lot of, and I think I see this coming, that a lot of the buildings in Japantown are old. They're just original, and I've been in some of them, up in the attics and in the back. And it seems inevitable that sooner or later, there's going to be this major renovation of the buildings in Japantown. So the trick, I guess, would be, if they do this major renovation in Japantown with the old buildings, how are they going to do that and still keep everybody happy and preserving the look of Japantown? Because there are a lot of things behind these buildings where you have houses literally connected to the backs of the buildings that are used as storerooms where nobody lives. And so they've been sitting there for decades. And I think it's just a matter of time before, some new business owner or some new building owner says, you know, we got to take care of this and we've got to remove it and renovate it, you know, and that'll be kind of tricky, keeping everybody happy.
Are there any follow-up questions from any of our students here or student researchers?
I just wanted to know, like, if you think there's something kind of like overlooked about Japantown that like a lot of people in San Jose might not really see the importance of it, but maybe like you or someone else that has been in the community kind of feels more connected to, like you'll be able to see that importance better, kind of.
I know there's like a group of people who are trying to get the word out, you know, about Japantown, trying to give it a sense of community in a way. Because most of the business owners, a lot of them don't live in Japantown. And even though the ones that grew up there don't live in Japantown. So there's this strange kind of people on the outside wanting to preserve what's on the inside. But there is a sense of, it's an unusual sense of community. It's not like it's a small town where everybody lives there. Everybody actually lives outside of Japantown, which is the way it is. And yet, what brings people to Japantown are the festivals and things like that. And so oftentimes a lot of the organizers try to find ways like the festivals to bring more people into Japantown and get it noticed. For instance, this weekend, although Lunar New Year is not exactly a Japanese thing, there are a few Vietnamese shop owners that are now in Japantown, and they have, you know, asked some of the people in the community, just can we have a Lunar New Year celebration in Japantown? And I think there's something going on this weekend. I don't know if it's Saturday or Sunday, where they're going to be celebrating Lunar New Year's. They're going to have a lion dance and firecrackers and everything going on. And so things like that, younger shop owners are trying to drum up and keep the interest on Japantown, and of course their businesses.
Thank you.
That was a really good question. I'm going to see if there's other questions like that or different from the students. I can ask one, and then you can also chime in, anyone. What do you feel about, and what is your sense of the history of the murals in Japantown?
I like them. Yeah, it was a surprising kind of project. I don't know if, I guess it was like a project. Suddenly murals started popping up everywhere around Japantown, and this was like about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago that the first murals started popping up. And I don't know if, I don't actually know the history behind them, other than I would ask questions about the artists. And there's a few of the artists that I actually know, and they're really good. And it was nice to see. Some of the art was related to Japantown, but some of the art was not, you know, and that still really was, it was nice to see art in Japantown when there really wasn't any, you know. The monuments and the memorials that you see in Japantown have just been very recent. And when I say recent, like within the last 20 years, hence again, the 70s, 80s, and 90s where there weren't, no museum, no monuments, no plaques, no art, so in the last 20 years, this has been coming around Japantown, and it's definitely added a lot to the community, for sure.
And also, I was wondering if you noticed any changes in the whole aesthetic or look of those murals. Like, do you think there's been a qualitative change in the way the kind of images they're representing, and what do you think they really mean for folks and for yourself?
Every artist has sort of their different take. Some of the art is commercial. Some of the art is just way out there. Some of it is very cultural. And there's a weird mix. There's a mix, sometimes people think because it's Japantown that it should be somewhat Asian related, Asian oriented. And that's not necessarily the case for Japantown, really. I don't think so. So you see a lot of Mexican American art. You see a lot of just varying things. So I'm not sure what the selection process is on the mural, or if it's up to the artist themselves to determine what is being painted. But yeah, it's varied. And, like, I don't know if you know, like, speaking of like Asian specific art, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but like there was a park that was built recently between two apartment buildings. There was a development going. So they built actually really nice park there. And they were going to call it Sakura Park, Cherry Blossom Park. And the developers got a lot of flack for that. And actually the owners of Roy's Station, and I believe even Tomik, you might want to ask Tomiko about this. They actually petitioned and fought the city to change the name of Sakura Park to Heinleinville Park. And the reason for that is Heinleinville actually, Chinatown used to exist in downtown San Jose. And they literally burned the town down and drove the Chinese out of downtown area. And so Heinleinville, who owned a lot of land around Japantown, actually offered the Asians a place to stay. And they actually called that area Heinleinville when it was first developed. So that kind of history, unless you ask people in the neighborhood, oftentimes you get, well, it's Japantown, let's just call it Cherry Blossom Park, and just settle for that. So some of the things that the community did, a handful of people, they actually petitioned the city to change the name of the park. And they literally had to go down to the city and state their case on why Heinleinville, in a time where you see a lot of names of schools being changed because they found out that the schools were named after people who were somewhat racist or inappropriate during the turn of the century. This is one guy who actually helped the Asians develop a town, a Japantown. Or before that, it was a Chinatown, actually. Yeah. But,
yeah. So we have about 7 minutes, and I did want to share some images that I pulled from your work of the miniatures, and I wanted you to if you could talk a little bit about the motivation for creating miniatures that are specific to Japantown. What do you what was your motivation, and like what do you think about this overall project? How you felt in the beginning and how you felt afterwards.
Sure. Um, the way the project just started was actually I wanted to test my 3D printers. In my work, I built models for a living on top of everything else that I did, and so oftentimes when I'm in between projects, I'm racking my brain to figure out, well, what am I going to do now? What's fun? What can I do? You know, and one of the things was my cousin mentioned a virtual reality or AR, augmented reality project that the Japanese American Museum was doing in Japantown. You know, and it was more of an art installation thing, and that got my mind thinking. Well, I don't want to just print something on the 3D printer. I just don't want to just print something, say, oh, fine, and then toss it. Let's, want to do something that has any kind of meaning. And it took me a few days to figure out, well, what is it that I want to print? What is it that I want to make? And walking, I walk every day in Japantown with my dog. And so I thought, the buildings. These are buildings that, in 10, 20 years from now, may look totally different. But there's some nostalgia that goes along with these buildings. But and they're very recognizable. When I was surprised when I posted these pics online, the reaction I got. I honestly didn't expect that. I actually was trying to see if maybe I could get rid of these buildings if anybody wanted them. Because I've got a ton of stuff like this on the shelves that, if anybody wants them or if anybody's interested, here you go. So yeah, the previous was the San Jose Japanese American Museum. This is the Buddhist church. And so I would 3D print all of this. And of course, it just comes out as a monochrome model. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just can't just leave it like that. So I started painting them. And then once you started with one, then I did another and another, and yeah, it was kind of fun.
Has the museum showed interest in displaying them, or?
I haven't heard from them. So nobody's interested right now. No, it's weird. It's like,
well, yeah, we're interested. The CHC is interested.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's why I posted it, because it's like, with projects in me, it's like once I've done a project, mm-hmm. I move on to something else. I rarely do the same project twice, or continue it. But yeah, I was thinking about doing another model of Japantown, but actually the entire intersection, like an architectural model, but that's just right now just a thought. So,
and in terms of like your own ethnic background, like how much of your ethnic background motivates you to do creative acts like this or others? How would you describe your background and like how your ethnic background? How do you feel like it has any connection to what you do in life?
It's not so much related to my ethnicity so much as it is to my age. And it's not that I'm nostalgic, but every project that I do, like if somebody asked for a gate, as an example, the owners at Roy Station wanted to redo their gates, their wooden gates, and their fencing, and they didn't have time to do it. So they asked me, can you redo our fence for us and our gates? I go, sure, no problem. But I didn't just do that, but I also said, hey, I've got a CNC machine. How about if I engrave your family crest on the gates and the fence boards? make it a little bit more personal.
Mhm.
And every time I do something a little bit more personal for people, they can't see it. So oftentimes I have to use Photoshop to give them a rendering. Here's what it's going to look like. And they go, oh, is that what it's going to look like? I had no idea. And so things like that, making projects a little bit more personal for everybody. The Manju shop, the same way I did inlay logos on all the steam boxes of their shop logo. I made a bench in Japantown and I engraved it with some koi fish and things like that, and engraved the name of the restaurant that it was in front of. You know, and with their family crest on the gates now, they say things like, oh, I wish my father could see these. He would really love the gates. Because now it's more than just a gate. It's, it's a family gate, something just a little bit more personal. I like doing that. So I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to personalize everything. And I don't sign anything. Everybody asks me to sign it, and I refuse. I don't need to. It's not my gate. So, but yeah, the models were kind of just interest. One in people love miniatures, especially if they own the building. They just go crazy